Hi, I'm Rick Dior, and today I'm going to talk about my studies with Joe Morello. A lot of you have asked me about this over the last 10 years, and I've really just, I don't know, I felt a little strange about doing a video like this, but I'm going to do it and talk about these things. A lot of them are very personal because I knew Joe for a very long time, from when I was, basically 13 years old all the way until he died. And things changed as time went on, but talk about that a little today. And I'll try not to talk too much, but I'll start out how I met him. When I was 13 years old, I played with a professional big band. I know that sounds strange, but it was called the Joe Carson Band. They were in northern New Jersey. At the time, I was going to high school in Edison, New Jersey, and my family had moved from Brooklyn to New Jersey. So I was going to school there. And I had a great teacher in New Jersey named Jack Winters, who was fantastic. He was in Plainfield, New Jersey. That's where Bill Evans is from, by the way. And I loved him. But with Jack, I worked on, vibraphone and some drum set and just different things. He was just a really great all around musician. And piano, I studied piano with him as well. But I wanted a little more technically than Jack could offer me at the time. So without telling him, I started studying with Joe. Now I met Joe, like I said, because I was playing this gig with this Joe Carson band, and we played, I believe, on this docked boat, ferry boat. My memory is a little vague, but maybe one of you out there will see this and remind me of what it was. But we played once a month, maybe, or twice a month on this boat. And turns out Joe was a member of this club. It was, and he would hang out there. And then one day when I was playing, one of the horn players came up and said, "Hey, Joe Morello's here." I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, he's a member, and we should let him sit in." And I said, "Well, yeah, absolutely." So he came and sat in. I think he played C Jam blues because he couldn't see, so it wasn't like he was going to read a chart, but that was in the book, and of course, he had no trouble playing any of that stuff. So he played it; it was great. But I remember during a solo, I had this Hanger snare drum, which had a really strange strainer. Like the lever was like this big, basically 3 inches or something. So I couldn't find it. So I was sitting right in back of him because I wasn't going to sit out in the audience. So I reached there and turned it off because he always had kind of a part of his solos that he would turn the snare off. And he and it went off all of a sudden. He goes, and he turns around. He goes, "Thanks," And anyway, he played. It was great, and I told him how much I enjoyed it. And then he would always wear sunglasses, and he took his glasses off, and he looked at me, and he says, "You're just a kid." And I said, "Yeah." He just shook his head. And then the next time we played there, he was there again, and he sat in again, and then we got to talking, and he asked me to come by the studio. At the time, it was Glenn Weber, who was a percussionist in New Jersey. It was his studio. I believe it was in Orange, New Jersey. But I was a kid, so I didn't drive. So my mom, who was an angel, and she did everything for me basically, she drove me there late at night because Joe would teach and he'd always be late. And so my lesson literally would start like 9 o'clock at night, and then it would go away. So my mom, she just hung out, or sometimes she'd drive back to Edison, which was not too far, maybe 30, 40 minutes away. And so what happens, we'd have this, I don't know if you'd call it a lesson, but we just play. And we played a lot of double drum set. I found out later from a lot of his students that he never did that with anybody. But I just thought, that was a normal thing. And he had two Ludwig kits in there, and we played, and sometimes for a long time. And then Master Studies wasn't out yet; it was coming out. So we worked on some of that stuff, and I was always his last lesson. And sometimes when my mom wasn't there, we ended. Usually the lessons were pretty long, if I remember correctly, and we would go to this walk down the block with his dog. He always had a beautiful. He had several, or two or three, since the whole time I knew him, and like a seeing eye dog. And we'd go down to this restaurant and just sit down, and I couldn't drink, but he would have a beer or something, and I'd have whatever, and we talk, which was really the greatest thing you could possibly imagine. And I was a little kid. I didn't really know much about anything, and I would ask him all kinds of probably stupid questions. I'd be embarrassed to see what I asked him, but I do remember some, and I would talk to him a lot about like the band because I was a kid in the band. I was the youngest one by like 20 years. Some of the guys in the band were 70s, and they all tell me different things and how to play and do all this stuff. And he would always say, "Wow, you sound like Don Lemond or something," and I'd be like, "Wow, that's I know I don't, but thanks." He said, "Oh, don't listen to any of those guys. They're horn players. They don't know what the hell they're talking about." And it was very encouraging and inspiring for me. And then he talked a lot about his things, and his things was Brubeck, and there's things that went on there. And Joe was a funny guy because he never really said anything bad about anybody that I witnessed. Because back then, a lot of musicians, they were pretty savage in New York. They would just rip people apart. But he wasn't like that. He pretty much, as to me, he loved everybody. And we would always talk about different drummers, and how he always said how much he respected, Buddy and Elvin and all the drummers I loved. And I was not a Brubeck fan. I did not really like Brubeck's music. I don't throw rocks at me, but I was a Joe Morello fan. He's just incredible in what he did. But I wasn't a big fan of that kind of music back then. I was listening to big band stuff, but later big band stuff, like Bill Holman and obviously Thad Jones, Mel Lewis band. Loved that stuff. And I was also listening to a lot of Train, a lot of Elvin, like everybody was, a lot of Philly Joe, that kind of style of jazz, and less of the kind of Brubeck kind of stuff. But over the years, as I grew up and I went to school at Manhattan School of Music, our relationship blossomed into, like I said, more of a friendship, and we would meet maybe once a month. I'd take the train out there, or a bus sometimes, and then because I was living back in New York, and we'd hang out like for a long time. We'd play and we'd talk, and I studied with this guy Fred Hinger at Manhattan School of Music, who I didn't know this, but him and Joe knew each other, and they had a mutual admiration society. They basically worshipped each other. And so Hinger would always ask me about Joe and what I was learning, and Joe would always ask me about Hinger. I felt like, why don't you guys just get together and hang out? But they never did. They were kind of on opposite sides. And Joe also told me he had dreams of being an orchestral percussionist, but he couldn't because he couldn't read, because his eyesight was horrible. So that was off the table. Luckily for us, right, that he went the direction he did. So, but Hinger had a definite thing about phrasing and using double strokes and all this stuff on the timpani and classical percussion instruments, and the same kind of philosophy. So he was crossing these borders, both of them together. Very kind of lucky by me to be in that situation. And while I was at Manhattan School of Music, they were starting a jazz program. So while I was there, the first year, it was Todd Kuhlman playing bass, and I think Richie DeRosa was probably the world's greatest jazz arranger right now, one of them at least, but a great drummer, played with Jerry Mulligan at the time. And then also John Riley was getting his master's there. All those guys had come back to get their master's degrees because they could do it in a year, and then they'd make more money where they taught. So I was kind of just in the right place at the right time. I was just like 17-year-old kid, and I was playing with the big band or subbing or doing this or that. At the same time, I would sub on different big band gigs in New York and do all this stuff. So I'd always ask Joe about this gig or that gig, and he always really had great insights, based on his experience of doing that same kind of thing. But the real benefit I got from him was not necessarily studying out of a book or anything like that. It was watching him, like watching him play. So every opportunity I got, I would bring stuff in and play for him. Like I'd play him the Wilcoxon solos all the time because he apparently worked with Wilcoxon and he knew how the stuff was supposed to sound. And I would play these things and he'd say, "Oh, that's good, but it doesn't. It can swing more, or it doesn't need to swing that much, or different things." So doing all that, I played every solo in that book for him over several years, and the rudimental swing solo book. So I really got a grasp of what that was about, which was great. And as far as drum set. I didn't study drum set with him. I don't think anybody studied drum set with Joe. We basically played together. We played duets like all the time for a long time, and we did that until the last basic get together I had with him, which would have been probably about 1987, when I went on the road for a year, right out of school. So I think it was 86 actually, and then I didn't see him again because I was on the road for a while. I saw him again 2 years later. I went to visit him. We hung out, but he had declined health wise. And then, but he was still playing, and he had a band now, and he was on that DMP label, and his band was playing some. I went out to see his band, and it was great. It sounded great. And then I moved to North Carolina in about 1989 or so with my wife and started playing in a symphony orchestra and making a new life here. And I would see him, maybe once a year. And then once he came to North Carolina to do a clinic at a place called Reliable Music, which was a really great music store here back in the day. And then we hung out then and visited. But over the years, I'd always send students to him. I sent many students to him just to take one lesson, to experience that. And they always came back. It was like they changed. They were like, I just can't believe like I was in the same room with this guy. I said, yeah, it's like osmosis, right? You see him play, and then all of a sudden, the sun comes out. You see all how it works. It's different seeing someone on a video and being in the same space with them. That's an amazing thing. So I feel so lucky I was able to share space with him for so many times when I was young. And that's pretty much, my Joe Morello experience. We basically, I didn't really study as far as, okay, here's your lesson for this week. I know he did that with other people, but with us, it was more like, we get together and we play, stuff. We play through his book. We play drum set. We did all that. So I did not have the experience maybe some of you others who studied with him, who actually he assigned stuff to and all that. And I don't know what that really means because I was a kid. I don't know if he thought I didn't need it, because I definitely did, or if he thought that just didn't feel like doing that. He just wanted to have some fun. So if that's the case, I'm eternally grateful to Joe Morello.
Now let's stop right here. This is not necessarily the only way to play, but for me, and I've been around this sphere 4 times, this world, and it's been very good to me. And I met a lot of drummers, and for some strange reason, they're all interested in how I do it, and I'm flattered by that. And I say that with humility, I'm not coming on like Buster Brown here, I say it with humility. I'm really pleased that they like what I do. Now that's my style. What I do on a drum set, it's improvisation. That's me. That's what I do. What I'm trying to get over to you is a technique to teach you how to be able to do what's in your mind. You know what I mean? I don't want you to play like me. God, one of us is enough. But it's just a natural thing, and so many of these teachers have made such a mystery of this thing, and just in order to keep the kids coming, the students coming. Well, I'm not into that at all. I'm not into that. That's not where I'm coming from. After 2 or 3 lessons, if it's not happening, well, please study trumpet. Because I love what I do, and I'm sincere in what I do.